Hello, sir.
On the Edgi podcast. The EdgiPod. Josh. The CEO of Edgi.
Yeah, that title for some reason still feels weird.
CEO?
Yeah, literally on my Twitter it says adjunct at NYU working on education things at Edgi Learning, and on my LinkedIn it just says co-founder of Edgi Learning.
Right.
I don't feel like you should call yourself CEO until the thing is working.
Right.
And it's a success. Then I think you can be like...
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into one of my questions here.
How does it feel to have a failing startup?
Well, what does a successful startup look like to you? And why do some startups fail and why do some succeed?
Yeah, I learned this thing. So we started this thing like a little over a year ago. Sort of. Tinsley and I were working on this like project where we were working with high school students to redesign their schools. And it seemed like it was going to become this annual event that we had at NYU. The pandemic hit. We couldn't run the in-person event. Decided to pivot to start a company around like remote learning, basically, because it seemed like that was something that students were really struggling with. And it felt like we could do something about it. And when I started, I had no idea what success looked like. I guess just like have a lot of users and money. But over the last year, just like learning about this world, like the startup ecosystem and like what, how they define success. I'm now understanding more about what it looks like. And there's this thing called product market fit, PMF, which is basically when you are offering something that solves a problem for somebody, like your user or customer, and they love it so much that they tell their friends about it, and your problem is not getting more people to do the thing. Your problem is keeping up with how many people who want the thing.
Right.
So success, like for Facebook had this issue where they were onboarding so many people onto Facebook. They weren't making any money, right? That didn't matter. It wasn't not like the business model was working. That's a different sign of success. Product market fit was just that they had so many people coming onto Facebook that their servers were like breaking.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have enough servers.
And sometimes that causes a startup or like a game to like ultimately fail. Because like too many people are hopping on it and the servers crash and it's like a disaster.
What's an example of that?
That happened with, it happens with a lot of video games. Like,
what's an example?
It happened with Diablo 2 recently. It happens a lot with Blizzard, actually. It happened with Warcraft 3. It happened with Diablo 3 when that came out. Like you couldn't even, like for the first couple of days, you couldn't play. Like you would just be stuck in the login screen. And for a lot of people, that like ultimately they lost interest after a couple days.
Really?
Like the hype died, and they're like, I'm done. I don't even want to play anymore. Because there's something about that initial. You want to log in at midnight when it starts, and you want to jump in with everybody. And missing that for some people causes them to just steer off.
I don't know enough about like the history of startups or whatever, but I can't think of an example where that killed the company. It's actually more often than not, that's the thing that gets investors to just pour endless amounts of money into the thing so that they can grow as fast as humanly possible and just like keep serving the demand. But it's really interesting. I mean, I get that like for games you would want... I think it's also tricky because there are just so many other options with video games. Like if the thing isn't immediately there, you just go to another game. Whereas if a startup is really successful, it's probably successful in part because they're solving a problem that no other company is solving really well, right? Like nothing else, like Facebook was just better than MySpace significantly. Yeah. And so people weren't like, I'll just go back to MySpace. Or maybe some people did, but it was like,
Remember the Flappy Bird guy? Do you know that story?
No. Tell me.
Do you remember the game Flappy Bird?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like his life was he just like made this fun little game, and it just exploded to such a high degree that he didn't know how to handle it and had like a nervous breakdown and like completely disconnected himself from the game because he just like couldn't handle the fame and all the buzz around it. Like he like totally freaked out.
It's kind of funny. Yeah, it's like
funny. It's
like,
just this funny game.
Right. The happy accidents of like, I guess maybe not so happy for him, but people making something and then not expecting, not with the hope that it's going to blow up, but just that because they want to do it.
Remember Coney 2012?
Yeah.
Yeah, remember that guy?
No,
do you know what happened to that guy?
No.
Similar thing, like Coney 2012 exploded.
Became this movement.
This huge movement, and then
I thought he made like a really good video.
He did. And like there were like these packages that you could have delivered to you and all this stuff. But it was a similar thing. I think there was some fraudulent things and some like there were like a couple of I don't know exactly what happened, but something was exposed.
Huh. He was actually just scamming people?
Yeah, something like that. And he like totally freaked out, had a nervous breakdown, same thing. And he was caught. Somebody caught him on camera running around his neighborhood naked, pouring a jug of milk over his head. Like his, you don't know, this is how the Coney 2012 movement ended.
Oh man, I don't think 2012 I was still like not really engaged with the world.
Yeah.
It wasn't until like 2015 that I started paying attention to things.
You can look the video up, he had like a nervous breakdown and his brain just snapped.
I think that's the thing about like not working really hard to make something succeed. There's something about you become, starting a startup is a very humbling experience because you think things are going to go a certain way, and nothing goes that way. And it's funny because I think, you know, potentially when in the very odd circumstance where it does actually just end up going that way, you get such an inflated sense of self and ego that it's like hard to like get a hold of, and you end up running around naked pouring milk on yourself.
Yeah. What's been the biggest surprise? What's been the most surprising thing throughout this process?
Oh man, the most surprising thing?
Yeah, or a surprising thing.
I mean, I think like,
or what's been the hardest thing?
The hardest thing is people won't tell you the truth. So like we'll talk to students all the time about what they want, but they're nice. Part of it is because like I teach at NYU. That seems like a really cool thing. I'm like 26 and also teaching at NYU, and these students, like, I think some of them look up to me, and so they want me to be happy. So they won't tell me when things are not what they want them to be.
Right.
Like I'll talk to them and they'll be like, yeah, it's great. But then they won't actually like do an action that shows that they really love something. And so it's really hard, you know, the common advice that you know people give to startup founders is like talk to your users all the time. But it's really tricky sometimes when you're talking to them and they just don't tell you the truth. You have to really like
squeeze it out of them.
Yeah. So that's hard. Because you can end up doing something that you think is the right thing to do, but then it ends up being that their actions don't reflect that. And also just like, I think another big thing is that the demographic that we're going after, high school students, is really tricky because they change all the time. And so you may think that there's some way, then they may like interact with the thing that you're offering, and then they may change because of it. And then you're
true.
like,
you are changing a lot in high school.
Totally.
You're from week to week almost.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So in the startup world, you're supposed to like identify a target persona, like what kind of customer do you want? Start small, pick a, you know, what are the habits that person has? Where do they normally hang out? All of those things. It's so hard to track for high school students because they're literally changing all the time.
Yeah.
And they all have like very different friends, and there's just like chaos. And on top of that, the world of education is upside down. So, you know, when we launched this, it was in the middle of the pandemic. Students had so much free time because school was terrible and teachers weren't assigning homework, and people were like, I don't know what the hell to do with this pandemic thing. And so students loved what we were doing. But then this fall, like a month ago or a couple months ago, when everybody went back to in person, both students and their parents were like, whoa, hold on. I need to figure out what my schedule is like. I'm now going back to person in time. Some of them were like, this is the first time I'm going to high school in person because I just did a year of remote. I don't know what to expect. And none of them had any time. Yeah. And so like the market is just changing so quickly that it's really hard to predict, what, and what's tricky about that is like startups rely on experimentation a lot, right? So you have to try different things, see the reaction, and then quickly make a decision. Is this working or is this not working? So that you can pivot to something else, right? Startups very rarely start with the thing that they're actually going to do. Facebook was like rating girls, right? It wasn't like the social network. Twitch was like Justin.tv. It was just this live stream of this guy walking around, and and then it evolved. And then they were doing live streaming for like sports and all these other things, and then they started focusing on, video game streaming, and it took off. And so it's like that you often just change. So it requires that experimentation. But if the market is changing too, like you may do something, it may not work, but it may not work just because of timing. Like maybe people really want this thing, but just not right now because something else is happening in their lives, and they need to adjust, and then they're going to want it.
So there's a luck factor, right?
Yeah, or it's just really hard to tell, like, is this not working because the product isn't good, or is it not working because of some external factor that will go away that we just need to like consider? But then do we wait? Do we not experiment with other things? Do we go back to things that we've tested because they may have failed, but not for the reasons that we thought they failed?
So it's interesting that so many startups start with one product and then end up with something completely different. So what do you think across a lot of the most successful, do you have like a favorite startup? Do you have like a favorite company, or like is there a co-founder or a CEO of a startup that you look up to?
I mean, I think like, as everybody, you look at big companies that are successful now, and you look at why they're successful and some of the things that make them successful. I really admire Apple. I think Apple has done an incredible job. Steve Jobs had this like beautiful take on life that was both mixed humanities and art and technology, and like thought about technology as this tool that just extended our natural abilities as humans and allowed us to do more. And Apple as a company is like, first of all, their attention to detail just makes you have an emotional connection with the products, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah,
it's insane. The thing that always blows my mind is when I learn, like the way they design the packaging for like iPhones, like that they actually have people that design, like the way you lift the cover.
Yeah.
Like they have people that design the rate of acceleration in which that like drops.
Totally.
It's just so cool.
Yeah, their attention to detail is like unbelievable, and you don't notice them, but like in interacting with the products, it makes you feel something, and that feeling is more powerful than any like marketing message they could sell.
I remember I had a friend that worked in advertising, and she got this job at like this big firm. But it wasn't there. She went to Carnegie Mellon, and Carnegie Mellon described like designers, like the people at Apple who design the little nubs on the bottom of the MacBook so it doesn't scratch your table, the little things like that the school described them as like the invisible heroes of like society, because you don't notice them.
Right.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it's also just like the if you watch their like presentations when they announce new products or the ads that they come out with, the focus on creativity, like they just had an event yesterday where they announced new MacBook Pros and new AirPods and whatever. And they started the event with this guy in a garage with an iMac and an old Mac computer that he boots on, and it goes bong, whatever the startup noise is. And he records it, and then he uses Logic Pro, which is an Apple software, to make this amazing song out of all of the different noises that Apple products make, like the clicking of AirPods
so
Pro. But it's genius because it's like, what Apple is signaling is if you're an artist and you love making incredible music, Apple is like the thing that you should be using.
Yeah.
So it's not, Microsoft, it's like business, whatever. But Apple speaks to this humanity that's in all of us. Like we relate to music and sound.
It does. I get an emotional reaction from people when they come into my apartment and see that I have a Windows computer. People come in and they're like,
they've done this amazing job
why
of
do you have a Windows computer?
Yeah, and it's through decades of advertising where they've positioned themselves as like the best that you can get if you're a human.
Yeah, if you have a Windows computer, you're like
you're not human.
Nerd.
Yeah, you're a robot.
Yeah, you're inhuman. Yeah, you're like a robot. Like
yeah, it's amazing. It's really amazing. Like all those Apple ads that were like, I'm a PC, I'm a Mac. And the PC is just like literally shuts down and looks like a robot. You know, all that advertising has been like burned into our subconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Apple's incredible. I also just, I value different startups for different things. Like I really appreciate Elon Musk has done a very good job at painting these grandiose visions that have gotten people to rally behind them. And it's not only evident in the fact that he has like some of the best engineers in the world working at SpaceX and Tesla and Neuralink and all these other projects that he's doing, but he's good at getting people like investors and like just other, he has this whole fan base that's like cheering him on, and Tesla hasn't spent a dime on advertising. Sort of like the opposite of Apple.
They have not a dime,
right?
Eh? Yeah, that's
not
amazing.
Not a penny on advertising, and yet, what's really funny? I want to make a video about this, but we were watching Ted Lasso the other day, which is an Apple show, and Ted Lasso has like every scene you will see like 5 Apple products in it. They're like so prominently displayed. Right. But at one point in the last season, it's not a spoiler, but one of the characters is in a Tesla, and you see the Tesla so prominently, like it shows the logo right on there. And I was like, whoa, Tesla doesn't spend any money advertising. Why am I seeing this? Like usually when you're in, you're watching like the Avengers and you see like an Acura, and it's like clearly that company paid a lot of money for that spotlight. But that to me says that Apple is consciously trying to like tie their products to Tesla's, because Tesla has done such a good job at focusing on details and positioning themselves as this like luxury product that Apple's like, no, if you own a Tesla, you also own an iPhone. Yeah, and it's like free advertising for Tesla because their product is just that good.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Or the director's just like, I want this Tesla in this.
I want this Tesla in this scene.
This Tesla is dope. I want it in.
Yeah, totally.
Want it in
but
the
it's
scene.
So it's like there's this shot it's just like the Tesla logo is like in your face because it's on the steering wheel, and someone's texting on their iPhone and the Tesla logo is right there. And it's like if a normal car, like if that was a Ford would have paid $10 million for that.
Yeah.
And like I don't think Tesla paid anything.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but Elon Musk does a really good job at like saying, this is our vision, this is what we're going towards, and I think it gets it makes people feel like they're like it's like there's a purpose to their life, like they're contributing to this mission. It's actually one of the things that I think is good about capitalism is that it does a very, I think we often dismiss the fact, and this is not true for many people who are working at companies who they don't care about the mission. Like people who work at McDonald's do not feel fulfillment, I think, from that work. But there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who work at companies where they really believe in the mission of the company.
Yeah.
And they go to work every day and they feel a sense of like fulfillment in the work that they do. Like work is not all miserable. Like sometimes you really feel, when I was working on Andrew Yang's presidential campaign, I hated my boss. Like it was not
it's hard to get out of bed.
Yeah. Like I did not want to go. Well, but that's the thing. It was easy to get out of bed because I felt like the work that we were doing was so meaningful. I was making videos that were helping people wrestle with this idea that automation is an issue that we should be talking about. And it transcended any of the drama at work or like not wanting to do the work, because I believed in what the mission, I believed in what we were doing, and it mattered.
Yeah, that's great. Well, how do you think like startup culture, if you want to call it that, like is and continues to like change the future of work?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because it's cool nowadays. Like people are just like back in the day, it's like a red flag, right? If you're jumping from job to job, startup to startup. But nowadays, it's like
it's expected, or it's just the norm. It's tricky. I think startup culture. I think sometimes gets in this, it's an echo chamber oftentimes. Like I've just started noticing this just in the last year because I've started paying attention to it. Like I was not in the startup culture at all. Right. You know, I was, working for Andrew Yang's presidential campaign. I was thrust into the political world for a little bit, which I had no context for and was not interested in at all before that experience. And then it was like, whoa, this is this whole world of like people, and they all use different language and like acronyms.
Yeah, and there are like celebrities within that culture too, right, that nobody knows about, but
yeah, I think it's a problem in a lot of these different worlds where you just become so insular that you're like, you only care about the things, the startup culture, everybody in the startup culture, I don't want to say it's totally homogenous, but like a lot of them have a similar view on the world. Like technology is the solution for everything, or like, and not even that, but I think sometimes you can get detached from like the rest of the world around you in the same way that, if you're immersed in politics, you forget. It's actually one of the things that I like about, I played a lot of video games when I was younger, and I still care about the culture and pay attention to like new games that come out. I watch IGN reviews and shit like that. And it reminds me that's another world, right? That you can just totally get sucked into and only care about. And you talk to someone else and you're like, Diablo 2, and someone's like, what are you talking about? I don't know what those words mean. And
I feel that way with just because I'm an actor, so I'm obviously, and I'm gonna turn that off. I'm an actor, and so I'm immersed in the entertainment business, and I love movies, and I love
totally.
And like it is the and theater, like theater in New York City, is the biggest echo chamber, and it's so funny too because like the whole sort of philosophy and the sort of goal of theater is to like reach out to the world, right? But you're just sort of performing in like these black boxes for like rich people in Midtown.
But it's tricky because like I love theater because I had a great theater program in my high school, and that's the only reason. And I still have trouble like finding time to go to plays, and
they're so expensive too.
It's right, it's not very accessible, right? You have to,
not at all. Why do you think startups are important for the economy?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think this is really coming to a head right now because of China. And I think in the next 10 years, China will like overtake the US as the largest economy. And China is proving to the world right now. For a while, they were like catching up. They were like behind on a lot of things, and they, in some senses, like just stole a lot of like things from the rest of the world. Like this, they had whole systems set up where they would just like copy patents and like, they're just bootstrapping themselves to like success, to lift, people out of poverty and like increase economic development and start engaging with the rest of the world. But they're showing that there's a different system that can help create progress, which is basically like a state-controlled, the government pours resources into a specific field and just accelerates development in that area, and it creates like a whole economic growth. Whereas the American narrative is we value entrepreneurs and startups, and we think that innovations come from people like Elon Musk, like these startups that, raise a lot of venture capital, hire people, create innovations, and then grow businesses out of, which has historically been true, with help from the government. The government was necessary for the creation of things like the internet, right? Like big infrastructure projects. But I don't know if that answers your question. I think it's interesting to think about like what is the main engine of economic growth? Is it like startups? Is it the government? Is it like is it better to have a distributed network of like startups that all hire, or like small businesses that hire small numbers of people? Is it better to have big companies? It's also, I guess one of the questions is like, what do you mean by a startup? Do you mean?
Yeah. What is a startup?
Yeah. What is a startup? We had this question.
That was my first question. What is a startup?
So yeah, it's interesting. I think It's just one of those words that can mean different things in different contexts. I think potentially, like if you were to Google what's the difference between like a startup and a small business, the answer probably goes something like, a startup is a company that is created with the goal of scaling to solve a very large problem, right? A small business is created more for the sake of just being like an entrepreneur locally, like solving a local problem. So like creating a hardware store in Stockbridge in Western Massachusetts, or like, I don't know, whatever, is creating a small business, right? You work for yourself. You may employ a few people, or even like, creating a small business in the sense of like going on Etsy and selling some handcrafted good. Maybe eventually you may hire a few people, but it's different if your goal is to create a company that aims to be the largest seller of soap in the world, right? And you have an innovative new way of approaching manufacturing the soap, and you have some idea of like the audience that you're going at. You're like, men don't use soap, so we're going to target men, and we're going to get men to use soap. Free startup idea. Actually, one of the students, so I teach a class at NYU called Entrepreneurship and Fundraising, which is funny because I've taught this class for like 3 years, and only this semester do I actually know what I'm talking about. And one of the groups is pitching this like skincare product that wants to appeal to all genders. And I'm encouraging them to start with a specific demographic, because you can't just like do something that appeals to everybody, because then you're not, what messaging is going to resonate with people? Use soap because it cleans you.
The world is a filthy place. That's really funny.
You've never seen soap like this.
It's like, okay, but what is special about your soap?
It's soap.
It smells good.
So I'm like, what's compelling about their idea is like, men don't use skincare products because a lot of the messaging from companies target women, or they feel feminine in their like marketing. And so you're like, no, I'm a manly man.
Yeah, that's why I don't use soap.
Yeah. Do you use a facial skincare
No, I don't
product?
use any soap.
No, really. Do you use facial?
I do. Yeah.
Oh,
I use Keith's. Well, I use I love Keith's.
Targeted at men.
Yeah. But I also use Elizabeth Arden. Which is a little.
How did you get
fancier.
turned on to Elizabeth Arden?
It was actually my mom, because my mom would use it. Yeah.
Yes, dude. I told them, I was like, go after young men's either girlfriends or mothers, because they are the ones who want their.
It was when it's when I like moved here, because the city is so filthy. So when I first moved here, I started noticing like I was getting really bad blackheads, and like my face was. That's when I first started going to college. So I went home for Christmas.
And your mother was like, your face is disgusting.
I went home for the holidays, and I was like, Mom, like I need, like my face is so, I need to start cleaning my face.
And your
she was
mom
like,
got
you
you.
should use this. Yeah, because that's what she uses.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm telling them. They won't listen to me. They're like, no, we want to speak to everybody. I was like, no, target young males' mothers.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
And you can get design packaging that's like, get this for your son for Christmas. And like, dude, moms are going to be all over that. My mom would be.
Oh, my mom would be all over that.
Yeah, I'm telling them this is such a good idea. They're not listening to me. It's fine. Yeah.
What do you think makes, I don't know if this is a redundant question, but a successful, what traits do you need to have, personality-wise, to be a successful leader of a startup?
That's a good question.
Co-leader, what are the traits?
I don't know if I'm a great leader, but I'll answer that question anyway.
Come on, Josh. You're a great leader.
Yeah, again, it's tied to that thing, like only call yourself the CEO when the thing is successful. Right. Or if you're raising money from investors and you just have to say that. I think one quality, like you need to be ready for it to be a roller coaster. We've talked about this before, but like startups are just, and you've seen this just being here for, a couple weeks.
It's just pivoting. Like it's just always pivoting.
Yeah, it's testing. Things don't work, and you need to know that that's okay that things don't work, and it's all part of the process. and just keep going. Like the number one reason why startups fail is because founders give up. It's actually not because they've run out of money or whatever. It's literally because the founders are like, I don't want to do this anymore. Screw this. Give me my life back.
Yeah.
That's why startups fail.
It's the same thing with acting. It's the same if you choose that career path and you see, like, especially when you leave school, you just see people they just start dropping like flies very quickly. They just give up because they're like, they can't handle it anymore. But the number one advice I take and I hear from like a lot of the actors and just artists in general that I admire is to just keep going. Just keep working.
Yeah.
Just keep working and working and working and working and working and working and working.
You know what's tricky about this? Like,
and you do get some actors that, like Olivia Colman, right? Do you know Olivia Colman?
Yep.
Yeah. She's been working for fucking, I don't know how many years. 40 years. Nobody really knew her. Now she's like a household name.
Yeah.
40 years.
What's tricky, and this gets a little meta, but I think that it's a shame that our society doesn't do a better job at providing safety nets for people because it requires a lot of risk. First of all, some people just can't start a startup because they have bills to pay and they have like, I am so fortunate to be in the situation where I don't have a ton of college debt and I like have loving and supporting parents. They're not paying anything for this startup, but like they are, even just knowing that I have that, like I could go home and I will have parents who will take care of me. Even my parents being together is like, that's a huge comfort that allows me to be more comfortable taking large risks. And that's not the only thing. Like I have plenty of friends whose parents are together, they're very wealthy, and they still would never start a startup. Like they don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, it could have the opposite effect.
Yeah,
make people like complacent or just sort of like, I don't need this.
Yeah. But I think like if we want more entrepreneurs, that's something that as a society we should do is like be able to provide more safety nets for people so that they can take risks and encourage them. Like risks are good. Like you have to be uncomfortable to grow. Like I have one of the things
the progress isn't linear, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing actually that I would say makes you a great leader potentially is like, or just makes you successful, or maybe contributes to helping you keep going. I know that even if this startup fails, the experience will have been way worth it because I've learned so much about. It's like basically getting an MBA, but like a hands-on, and like I don't have to pay to go to an MBA program. I don't have to go to an institution. I'm like starting a startup. I'm learning about business. I'm learning about customers and co-founder relations and like hiring and managing and raising money. And not only that, but I'm learning a lot about myself. We're also, because what we're doing is educational, I'm learning a lot about the world because like you learn about the world and you're like teaching it.
Does it happen that like entrepreneurs, they have a startup and they meet investors and then they fail and then they do another startup and they meet the same investors?
Yes,
and they're
all
like,
the time.
Actually, hi, how you doing? I have this new.
They like that better.
And they like that better, because they're like you're more seasoned and you're.
Yeah, I mean it's depend. Like you have to.
And they know you're.
Yeah, relationships matter. So like you have to. They're not gonna like it if you like raised money, blew it all on like partying or something, didn't give them any updates. Startup fails, and then they go back and they're like, "Give me more for this new idea." They're like, "No."
What is it? Soap.
No, but at least as far as I haven't tried to do this, so I could be wrong. I could go back to investors. I mean, hopefully the startup doesn't fail, but
Yeah, but I have a question, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, they could. My sense from like talking to people is that it's actually preferable. Obviously, if the startup succeeds and someone's starting another startup, that's the best case scenario because it's like you've done it before and you've succeeded, so you really know what you're doing. But even if you failed, you at least have some kind of experience, like you know what to look out for and things.
And it's the same way when you're applying to a school or you're applying to a job and you don't get it, and then you come back years later with more experience. Like people love that. Schools love that. And often you get in.
Yeah, it's like, are you honest about? Are you sharing your challenges with people as you're facing them?
Yeah, but the question is, it almost seems like with startups, like it doesn't, it fails only when you say it has, right? Like when's the moment
When's
that
the moment that it fails? Because you're failing all the time. So when do you decide that the last fail is the final fail?
The final fail.
The final fail. Da-na-na-na.
But it almost seems like, though, that the final fail is when you decide, like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
It could be for a couple reasons, right? So we aren't paying ourselves anything right now. I have enough in savings, and I'm still working at NYU, although NYU does not pay very much, that I feel like, I'm okay. Dude, some of my students think I get paid like $100,000 a year to teach at NYU. I'm teaching 2 courses. I get paid like $3,000 for each of them. So like a total of $6,000 this semester.
It's insane.
Those students probably pay
so much money.
$14,000 each for the course.
Every minute of that class is like $500.
Right. It does not go to the teachers.
No, it goes to
especially adjunct faculty.
It goes to some fucking building in the Upper East Side.
For NYU, it's just their expansion to dominate the entire city.
Just a real estate company.
Yeah, but for a lot of schools, and including NYU, it's just administration costs and like the business of like getting more students to come and pay, and like scholarships.
I was walking in the
other students.
Upper East Side the other day, and I just walked past this beautiful, big, ornate, like pre-war white building, and there's a plaque on the front that there was like a gate. I couldn't even get to the door, but I could read the plaque, and it was like the NYU Building for Art Preservation. And I was just like, why do you need this building?
Yeah.
What do they use this for?
Yeah.
So they can all just get together and sit and have a meeting about the next building they're gonna buy? Like,
ridiculous. But to go back to your question, like what's the final fail? I think it's either whether you just give up as a founder, you don't have enough money either to keep paying yourself, or, and this is why burn rate really matters a lot. Burn rate is like how much money are you spending what's your runway? You raised a certain amount of money. How much time do you have to go before you run out of that money, right? Because then you're going to have to go back to investors, and then it's up to them, right? If you employ people, the startup fails when you can't pay their salaries anymore, right? Or rent or whatever the thing is that you need to survive. Maybe the co-founders can keep going, but that's a huge hit to morale if you have to start firing people and you run out of money, especially if it's then hard to raise more money from from investors. You never know whether you're going to have enough traction to be able to raise the next round or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think in the most, it's either like founders give up or investors get apathy and don't care, are just apathetic about the startup, and so they don't care to keep funding it. Then a startup dies. But usually it's the first. If founders still really care about something and they want to keep doing it, and they're honest about it, and it's not just a joke or whatever, I think for the most part you'll still be, unless you have a crazy high burn rate, you'll still be able to raise money. It's usually founders just give up.
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
So what would Josh do if the startup fails? What's the first thing you do?
Yeah.
What do you do?
I've learned a lot in the last year, so I'm hesitant to say this, but I still feel it's hard for me to imagine not working on this.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine quitting or just the final fail. I can't even picture what the final fail would look like.
Well, that's a good place to be.
It's funny.
I think that's a really healthy.
It's funny because it's true for the opposite too. We went to this EdTech conference called ASU GSV, and we were around this table. It was the first time that I had met. I'm not in a bunch of startup communities. I was really an outsider to this whole thing until recently. And we were at this conference, and we were at this dinner table, and everybody was talking about their startups. And we met Tinsley and I went and met a bunch of people. And someone asked this question around the dinner table, what's your exit amount? And what that means is, if someone were to offer to acquire your company, how much would the offer have to be for you to accept it? What's your exit play? And I forget what the language that they use, but apparently it's this common question they get asked. What's your price?
So they're asking you what would it what would it take for you to give up your startup to someone.
Yeah,
right?
it's funny,
Like,
but it's not. Most people don't even frame it like that because I don't know about most. Maybe that's a generalization, but a lot of people are starting startups to make money. That's the point of starting the startup.
So that
to me, that seems crazy.
Yeah.
There are the risk-adjusted reward of working. You're much better off at like a big tech company or something than starting a startup.
It also seems like some of the startups or businesses that we've talked about just in the last half hour did not start that way. Like, let's make money.
The people did not try to
make money.
do it to start money. Well, it's tricky. Like Elon Musk is a great example. Elon Musk did start his first few startups. Like his first one was Zip2, which was like yellow pages on the internet.
Oh, and cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he sold that for a lot of money, and I'm sure he did it to make money. And then his second one was X.com, which turned into PayPal.
Elon Musk started PayPal?
Yeah, most people don't know this.
I had no idea.
There's this thing called the PayPal Mafia. It's like a bunch of people who started PayPal then went on to start other companies. Elon Musk. Peter Thiel is another one, if you know that guy.
Peter Thiel?
Yeah, Peter Thiel was like he's like this classic contrarian who like supported Trump and is very wealthy. He just likes to say the opposite of things for fun. I don't know. He's also very smart and has good ideas, but he has this thing like don't go to college. He does this Thiel fellowship. He sponsors people to not go to college.
That when they say that's so annoying, don't go to college. Like, shut up.
Yeah.
Like some people want to go to college.
Yeah, I mean the whole college debate is really tricky. It's like, is it worth it? The cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends.
Yeah. Anyway, so they asked this question. They were like, "What's your exit number?" And I laughed because I was like, there is no amount of money that someone could pay me at the moment. There were a few times recently where I was like, I'm starting to feel like this is really harder than I thought. And if we continue to failing and there's a clear exit strategy, but there is no, I still stand by this. There is no amount of money. And if our investors are listening, they might not like to hear this. No, I would hope that they want to support us taking it all the way. But there is truly no amount of money that someone could offer me for me to say, okay, yes, now I have sold my company to you. Because I said this at this dinner table, and everyone was like, come on, dude.
Yeah,
$200 million. They just started throwing out numbers, and I was like, no. And they were like, dude, 500 million. Like, they thought just the more money that they said I would. My brother even asked me this recently, like, what would you, if I offered you $200 million, would you do it? Like, what amount of money? And it's just like, for me, I'm doing this because first of all, I love doing it. Second of all, I think it's the most like useful thing I could be doing with my life. I just think that education is hugely important. I had a very weird, kind of bad education experience that didn't suit me. I know a lot of students feel the same. And we have all these challenges in the 21st century. And I feel like if we can better educate people and have open and informed conversations around them, we can like pave a better future for humanity. It's just like the thing that we should be doing. And if someone bought Edgi, like this company, I would want to create another company that tried to compete with them. Like, it's just what I want to be doing. So why would I sell this thing that I'm working on so that I would then have to start I would go crazy if first of all, I'm not good at being an employee. Part of the reason why I started this startup is because I am really not good at working for other people.
Yeah.
This does not go well. So I definitely don't want to do that.
That's funny.
And I don't want to just sit on my ass either. Like, this is fun. And like meeting students is fun and hearing their perspective on the world and like, and the like light bulb moments for them when they finally engage with something or they make a connection or they, feel like there's purpose and meaning in life and there's something that they want to strive for. It's so fulfilling. And it's like, it's really hard. The roller coaster is really hard, but I would not sell Edgi, nor do I think there's like a point where I would be like, oh, now we failed fully. Let's wrap it up.
Do you feel like the people in your life, friends, people who are outside of it, family, are like oddly sort of against you in a way?
Yes.
Do you feel that? I feel that.
You feel that with me?
No, I feel that in acting.
Oh.
That's
so interesting.
Everyone's kind of, not everyone, but some family members they're just waiting for
it to fail.
Yeah.
It's so weird that you said that, because I was like, Jeff, well, you must know that I feel that way, and you're like setting this question up. But I didn't realize that that's also something that you.
Yeah.
It's spot on.
Every actor feels it. Anyone watching who is like trying to make it as an actor.
Yeah, my
relates
friends
to that.
My friends have they think it's kind of cool. Sometimes when I see them and they see that I'm not miserable, they're like surprised, and they're like, "Oh, are you doing something cool with your life?" Like, dude, what?
Yeah.
They assume that I'm miserable, and that like I'm going, like they're waiting for me to fail, and they don't want to be around. It's like I'm a bomb, and they're like distancing themselves from the explosion. And then sometimes they see me, and it's like they think, oh, like maybe he's not a bomb, and he's actually a bomb, but it's like a fun, joyous bomb.
They're compartmentalizing you, like they're.
I don't know what's happening. I've struggled with trying to figure out what's happening, but I do feel like, we got this studio space, and I tried to bring a bunch of people here to look at it, and like some came, but a lot of them were like, yeah, we'll come, like we'll support you. But they never did. Or I text them and they just don't respond to my text. Like, it's so weird.
What do you think that is?
I don't know.
I think people get jealous, like weirdly jealous, when somebody goes ahead and like
does something that they
pursues their
care
dreams.
about. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it makes them feel bad, like they aren't doing.
Because there's like like for people, I think there's a fork in the road when you decide like I'm gonna pursue my dream, and then there are some people that don't. I think out of fear, and then you travel down those paths, and then like 10 years go by, and I think for a lot of people it's just too late. They're on a path for the rest of their life, and I think they get jealous and envious of people.
Yeah, I think that's
what
probably
it is.
true.
It's like kind of a nasty thing to say, but I think it's, and it's not like those people are like shitty for not pursuing, and not everybody has a big dream that they want to follow. Like
totally. And some people are just trying to like, dude, the world is a crazy hard place. First of all, some people don't have the option to pursue their dreams, and some people are just like, hey man, I'm just trying to get through life. Like, don't put your
comfortable.
But I also feel
pay the bills and like be happy and just
right.
Survive.
But those people, I don't think those people are conflicted about it. I think that there are some people who are just like, no, I'm just trying to get through life. Like, let me do.
Yeah.
And I have some of those friends, and they are actually like supportive, and they're like, that's cool that you're doing that.
Yeah.
That's not me, but I'm good. You do your thing, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are other friends that I think are like, they feel some conflict about what they're doing, and that, and it's hard because like, they're still my friends. Like, it sucks. I want them to be supportive and like, and of course, if we're successful, I have no doubts that they're going to be like, suddenly cozy up. And
yeah, that's the thing.
Hey, buddy. Hey, best buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's all right. I mean, life is hard.
Yeah, life is hard.
It's also like, at the end of the day, who wins and who loses? Like, do I lose because my friends aren't like immediately supportive of me doing this really risky thing, or like at the end of the day, am I just going to feel more fulfilled about the time that I spent on this earth?
Failure it's all about you. It's all about no one else has the same definition of failure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I said before, I think part of the thing that I feel why I want to just keep going is because even outside of the success of the startup, I'm learning so much, and I get to do what I want to do, and I don't have to worry about being fired because I'm a bad employee, which is key.
Yeah.
I'm growing as a person, and it's like, no matter what happens, I am getting so much out of this experience that it's just worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, closing thoughts. Is there anything you would tell a young baby Josh?
I think it was
pre-Edgy Josh.
I think it was really good to like go out and get some. I didn't have very much. Like, you need 2 years, maybe max, of experience after college before starting a startup. unless you're like just crazy and you have some amazing idea, or you're amazing at programming, or you don't know, just want to go for it. There were a few times where I thought about dropping out of college, and like I wanted to just start something and do something more meaningful. But I'm glad I got some experience. As I'm getting older, there's something useful about experience that I think I dismissed before.
Yeah.
And
I feel that.
I do think you should just take risks. Like in general, don't worry about what people say. Follow your heart and your gut, and don't worry about what people think about you or are going to think about your actions.
I think you got to do something that scares you every single day.
Yeah,
I think
cool.
you have to take a risk every day.
Yeah, you have
and it's a muscle.
Right.
And just the more you do it.
Yeah, and
then you reach higher places.
That's a great note to end on. I got kicked out of high school, and my life didn't fall apart. Yeah. And that was hugely helpful for me. I exercised the muscle of making a huge mistake and things not being destroyed.
Because at the time, if you get kicked out of high school, you think...
Oh, I thought it was over. My parents were like... my parents thought my life was over. But I have friends now, and I think they're like, they didn't fail enough when they were younger.
Yeah.
And now they're concerned that if they take a risk, they're like, the world is going to blow up. And I think, when you're, and maybe this is also advice to parents. I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but like, let your kids make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
I made so many mistakes.
So true.
My parents were very protective. They're psychoanalysts. They were worried about my mental and physical health all the time. And I think that's part of the reason why I was just very rebellious and like made a lot of mistakes, but that ended up being really useful.
It's the same with me. I made a lot of I did a lot of stupid things in high school.
It's good.
And
stupid things are good.
Yeah, I was lucky. I had great parents. They guided me, but they weren't helicopters,
Yep.
They let me fail big time.
Yeah, failure is good.
Yeah, I think if I had to answer my own question, if I had to go back and tell a younger Jeff, it would be fail.
Yeah.
Every day. Like now, the mindset I have these days, sometimes it gets me into situations that I just don't want to be in. Like I say yes a little too much sometimes, but it would be if something scares me, that's an automatic flag that I should do that thing. Whereas back in the day, it was the opposite. It was like, if I'm scared of something, then I'm going to not touch it with like a 10-foot pole.
As long as you're like somewhat rational about it.
Yes.
And it's not like...
Yeah. It's like, hey,
there's some things that scare you that you probably shouldn't do.
You want to go base... what's it called?
Base
jumping off of
Manhattan Bridge?
Yeah. Maybe no.
Maybe not. Yeah, but for the most part, I think that's right. Like, if something scares you, really consider why it scares you and whether you might learn something or grow if you do it anyway.
Yeah.
All right.